Please welcome the President and CEO of Avianca Holdings, Anko, and Regional Vice President of the Americas at IATA, Peter Cerda, in conversation with Skift Aviation contributor, Kristin Majcher.
Hello, everyone. Hi, how are we doing? Thanks so much for joining us today at the Skift Aviation Forum. My name is Kristin Majcher. I'm joining everyone from Medellin, Colombia, where it's currently raining. We've had lots of rain. Anko, where are you joining us from? I think maybe you're muted. Could you unmute?
There we go.
Hello?
There we go.
Okay, great.
Right? I'm in Bogota, and it's raining like hell. Really, I mean, it's been one of those days. It's raining.
Okay, and Peter, is it raining where you are? Where are you right now?
No, I'm in sunny Miami, and it's about 83 degrees today.
Ah, wonderful, of course. Okay. Well, thanks so much for joining us. We only have 20 minutes, so let's jump right into the questions. And if you're watching at home and have a question, feel free to add it to the chat, and we will be going through those throughout the event. So first of all, thanks so much for spending some time with us today. We're talking about Latin America, what's going on now, and then what our outlook is for the next few months and possibly after. So my first question is for Peter. Peter, could you give us a brief overview of what Latin America looks like right now for a traveler, in terms of what's open, which countries are requiring testing, just to give us some context about this region?
So, Kristin, first of all, the outlook is much better than it was about a month and a half ago, where at that time, a large percentage of our main and key markets were still closed. We're still shut down because of restrictions, border closures. Today, we find ourselves in a much different situation where you and Anko are located. Colombia was one of the last large countries to reopen its borders, both domestically and internationally. We're now there. Peru has opened international. Chile, which is one of these interesting cases, the country never closed, but it had restrictions to come into the country. Only Chileans and residents were permitted. They are about to remove this restriction at the end of the month, in which you'll be required to have PCR negative to be able to come in. So slowly, the region is opening. Mexico, Brazil never closed. Argentina has opened, but also with restrictions. So we're moving in the right direction. We're still not there in markets like Argentina, Chile. We're still pending that. We have very few countries that are actually closed until further notice. Venezuela, Cayman Islands, Trinidad and Tobago are some of the countries that remain fully closed off with no air transportation. So we are seeing a recovery. Traffic is slowly coming back. Mexico has been remarkably impressive. Most of the carriers there have pretty much gotten to about 92% of the capacity they had in the past. So Mexico, Brazil, we're seeing a very good recovery. Colombia is slowly coming on. So the forecast is much better than it was before. We still have a long road ahead. We're still dealing with our government in terms of quarantine and restrictions, but we are much better than we were a month ago.
Okay, great. And then Anko, as an international airline, how has Avianca been dealing with these differences in government policies, both in terms of logistics for the airline, but also in terms of demand and what customers are expecting when traveling? For example, I was just looking at some flights from here in Medellin to different places in Latin America, and it's not always immediately apparent what you have to do to enter one of these countries and even where you can go. So just curious how that's been affecting Avianca.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely the perfect question, right? I mean, it's great to hear Peter talk about the progress that we've had over the last few weeks, and it's undoubtedly true, right? I mean, we're far more open than we were a few weeks and months ago, but that's from a very low base, right? Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Central America, all of those markets really shut down, right, completely. So yes, we're open, but I think if you ask almost anyone in the streets right now, hey, give me a list of destinations where you can actually go to, I think people will find it very hard to say, well, this market's still open, closed. For these and these markets, I need a PCR test. If I go to countries X, Y, Z, I need to quarantine myself, and then there's quarantines for 7, 10, or 14 days. It's an absolute mess, right? Let's be honest about it. So yeah, we're very happy that things are getting better. And that's not a statement to accuse, right? I mean, it's not. We all understand what's happened this year. It's very complex, but I do think we're running. I'm at the end of my patience for different country rules, different sets of conditions, differences in well, like I said, a PCR test here, there, whatever, quarantines, yes, no, but also our civil departments, which still do not give us the absolute clarity on when do we get the slots for, right, whatever destination. Here we are again talking this morning about Argentina. We've got the slots, we've been selling them, we've got the aircraft ready, and yet we may not fly. And those are flights for the 1st of December, right? I mean, that's 10 days from now. If we need to again punt on those dates, and I'm not picking on Argentina because there's a slew of those destinations in those cases, it becomes really, really complex to manage. And you're going to cancel again thousands of passengers who then again cannot have access to your call centers or whatever. And of course, we're working on digital solutions, but more clarity well in advance will only help all of us, right? So now, then go back to your question, how are we dealing with this? Well, the best you can, right? I mean, I think we have to be honest. Every single airline in the world is now faced with this. So yeah, planning, and I think I've said this before, our typical planning cycles were at least 18 months out, right? That's long-term planning. Mm-hmm. And medium term is basically 9 to 18, and your short term is anywhere from 3 to 9, and your operational window is 0 to 3. Right now, long-term planning is literally still the month of December, because like I said, where are we on places like Madrid, right? So from Colombia to Madrid, there's still issues that we are unclear whether we can actually fly what we currently have out for sale. And what we have out for sale is only 1 daily frequency. We flew 3 daily frequencies, Bogota, Madrid, and we flew Medellin, Madrid, and Cali, Madrid. So, right, it's really bizarre. It's really hard. Everything is very last minute. And I think if we were to do ourselves a service, the governments, airlines, the entire industry is planning ahead, right? Making sure at least that we can at least have a few months of planning window.
Okay, and Peter, just curious if what we're seeing in Europe right now with, people are talking about this second wave of COVID, if that might be affecting some of the recent progress that we've seen here in Latin America to open things up.
Well, I think what's happening in the US and Europe is certainly going to have an impact on Latin America. Our region in Latin America is very tied to both of these areas. And when we face these type of challenges, obviously, we always face the possible losses. In this case, it's even greater because getting people on airplanes at this moment is just very difficult, very challenging. And if they do, most of the decisions are made very close to the departure. As Anko said, the biggest frustration for the industry has been the lack of collaboration, clarity from our government. Mm-hmm. Clarity comes very late in the game, and the airlines have to adapt or modify. And in terms of collaboration, countries are simply not talking to each other in most cases. And that has made it so difficult for the industry to restart, has made it very difficult for public confidence to return. And if we continue down the same route, it's going to be even more difficult. And that's probably one of the requests we're making to government, the importance of transparency, clarity, collaboration, and certainly cross-border coordination. Because as Anko said, they were used to flying 3 dailies between Bogota and Madrid. Now they're 1-to-1, and they don't even know how it looks on a day-to-day because the regulations, the standards, the procedures are changing so rapidly that it's not being well aligned.
Okay, thanks. And so who is traveling right now? Because there are flights happening. Anko, what is the split like between leisure and business? And is it possible to plan the outlook for those? We're curious if business travel will come back. What do you think about that in terms of what you're seeing right now? And can we plan for the split between business and leisure in the next few months?
Yeah, I think there's a few conclusions that you can really draw already, which is, no rocket science. I think we're seeing this around the globe, which is one, domestic travel rebounds faster than international. And secondly, VFR, leisure, right? Hey, we all want to see our parents and brothers and sisters again at some point, right? Or your friends. Leisure rebounds quicker than business. That's absolutely true. With a caveat, because I frequently see this whole debate around business being very much a large corporate account, corporate argument, basically, right? And I think there, yeah, definitely people are investing in Zoom and people are investing in what sort of digital solutions, right? Look at us here today, and that works. We see a lot of SME already activity, right? You do see people who have their businesses, they're private business owners, they're definitely back, right? I've been flying a few times a month now, and talking to people at the airport or right on board of the aircraft as well. Those people really clearly have a need to see their plans. They really have a need to see again their own teams, which you haven't seen. So they're traveling. I think those major corporates, the major corporations, I think some of them sometimes have their own maybe digital interests as well at heart, right? When I see Microsoft come out and says, well, business travel is going to be significantly reduced for the next 12 to 18 months. And I think, yeah, you're also investing in Skype and Teams. And of course, you're going to say that, right? But that's fine. We all get how that works. Clearly, there's an impact. We do see at least that SME segment already back, and we do see VFR and leisure being relatively strong. Again, from low bases, right?
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about partnerships and connectivity, since we're talking about different countries working together or perhaps not working together. Anko, could you tell us a little bit about what Avianca's relationship with United is like right now? And a question that we've all been wondering about, which is the status of this planned joint venture between Avianca, United, and Copa. So what's the status of that JV? Is that still in the works? Is it still something you're looking at? And what's the relationship like right now with United?
Yeah, I'm going to sound like a broken record on the second one. Maybe also in the first one. Your first question is, what's the relationship with United like? It's great, right? Absolutely great. We've got a fantastic relationship, I must say. At personal and professional level, Scott Kirby, John Gibo, they've been absolutely supportive throughout the whole process. And yeah, broken record on the second one. I think last year, what you know from Avianca was that we were going through an out-of-court restructuring, where we really had to make sure, at least, right? Let's stabilize things. Let's make sure that we know what we're talking about from a network perspective, client perspective. What is the future Avianca going to be like? And so that's what we did in 2019. And then going into 2020, we picked up those discussions with both Copa and United, and then this hit. And I think fair to say, we've been well, let's put it this way, rather distracted for the last let's call it 7-8 months, right, with COVID, and making sure that we just focus on much shorter term. So we'll pick that back up. There have, of course, been high-level discussions, and it's absolutely not dropped off the radar, but we haven't made much progress. I think that's just where we stand. It's just the reality of 2020, basically.
Sure, and this is a good segue into talking about the financial health of airlines in this region, which obviously, like other regions, is very difficult right now. So here in Latin America, we see several big carriers, LATAM, Aeromexico, and Avianca, have filed for bankruptcy in the past few months. So Peter, I'm curious about your thoughts on this. Why are we seeing these bankruptcies in the region? Perhaps why aren't governments giving more support? Does this have to do with perceptions of aviation and its importance here? Why aren't governments helping these carriers more with bailouts?
Yeah, so our forecast, which may change actually next week, is it's about $84 billion that the industry is going to lose next year. $4 billion for our Latin American carriers. But if we look at before COVID, while the rest of the industry was enjoying very good times, our region was still struggling. It was still a significant challenge. And you look at the social, political, economic challenges that we have, it's never ending in our region. Argentina, economic crisis. Chile, Peru, which are very stable countries, social unrest. So our region has been continuously in the challenging environment. Why is it so difficult? Many of our governments, frankly speaking, still see the aviation industry as a cash cow. It still sees it as an industry of the rich, instead of seeing aviation as an economic enabler for their countries. The region doesn't have the same resources as North America and Latin America or Europe in terms of high rail systems, highway. To get from Bogota to Medellin, it's going to be by air. You could get on a bus, but many people may not want to get on that bus. It's many hours. It's not safe. Aviation continues to be the safest, most reliable, and in most cases, what the industry has done, Anko and the other CEOs, has made it very competitive to what the busing industry was. People went on buses because it was cheaper. It's not cheaper anymore. The problem is the governments continue to impose all these levies on the industry. That's what makes it so disadvantaged when you're looking at North America or Europe, where it's just an open market. Governments are helping the industry to continue to stimulate. It's not the case in our region. Some countries are very proactive, others are not. And that's what has really kept the region behind. And you look at Avianca, you look at LATAM, you look at Aeromexico, Copa. These are really well-run airlines. These are real airlines that have invested significantly. They're some of the safest airlines, but they're still struggling on a day-to-day basis to be competitive with their competition from other regions. And that's really on the government fault. When asking for government help, what we're asking is let's modernize our system, let aviation run its business like in any other sector.
Okay. And Anko, I'd like to hear your perspective on this, because the Colombian government has agreed to give up to $370 million in loans to Avianca, right, as part of the bankruptcy process. But I'm reading some reports that perhaps there's moves in the courts here to block that. So could you clarify whether Avianca is planning to receive government funding from Colombia and how that fits into the overall financing plan as it looks to get out of bankruptcy?
Yeah, well, it's actually quite simple. We've issued also a 6K last week, right? Official market information. We do not need that we do not need a government money. We've made it now absolutely official. We do not need a government money, and we went with the market, and so it's a completely market-based deal. We can't be any more clear there. There were steps before, and I think it's almost irrelevant to go in there, but I do think in a way that some people are still stuck with that notion of, hey, the government may be helping, yes, no, will Avianca get government support? The answer is just very clearly no, and that's just fine, right? Absolutely okay, because we went with the market. We got the $2 billion DIP deal, right? So $2 billion approved, $1.2 billion of that is fresh cash, right? And we're very happy, right? I mean, that is just the fact of life. So the answer is very short, no government involvement or no government support there in that sense.
Okay.
Kristin, if I could just add, of the $160 billion that governments have given around the world, less than 1% has been given by our governments in Latin America. Actually, Colombia is the only one that has actually stepped to the front to offer the money. Brazil, there was an announcement, but that hasn't been executed right now, up to now. So it's less than 1% of our governments in Latin America have actually offered our airlines in the regions for that financial support when you compare the US $64 billion and then in Europe the remaining.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we do have to wrap up in a few minutes. I just want to get to some audience questions very quickly. This is an audience question for Anko. Political volatility has been something of a pressing issue in Latin America. How will Avianca curtail this on top of a pandemic-based recovery?
Yeah, we're probably not trying to be too funny about it, but I do think that political volatility, fuel price volatility, rate of exchange volatility has really been, a fact of life really for Latin American airlines always, right? So it's something that you just factor in. But there is something which always upsets all of this, and it's why I'm, at least for the medium long term, where we're still bullish on airlines here, which is economic growth, population growth, definitely very young populations that still get into the labor force and everything else. And then, of course, everything else that Peter already alluded to, right? I mean, if you look at Bogota, Medellin, right, the example that he gave, 8-9 hours by car bus, 35 minutes by air. These are geographies where there is no road system really. There is, of course, there is no rail system at all. And there's a lot of mountains. So the geography really speaks to the advantage of airlines. So how do you deal with it? I think we're far more focused on the pandemic and the impacts and effects of the pandemic everything else, in a way, and again, of course there are factors, and of course they're important, but if you take the long view, then there is still solid growth, we think, in Latin America.
Okay, great. And our last question, because we have to wrap up, is another question for the audience, which I'll give to Peter. Looking at the Caribbean, which overall has done a pretty good job of COVID control, what's the possibility of more connectivity inter-region with a view to capitalize on a local market? So asking about the Caribbean and connectivity.
So I think the Caribbean has done a very good job. They started early. They implemented certain protocols. If you look at the U.S. carriers, a lot of the investment is being done into the Caribbean and the Cancun area over the winter season. So you can see that there's a level of commitment to that area. I would say the one risk that we see in the Caribbean is prices are going up. Governments are beginning to increase on taxation, on tourism fees. That is the wrong decision to make. If you want to attract passengers at this time, you have to make it competitive. You have to base it on level of service and not on price. And they're going to outprice themselves if they continue to increase fees by $45 or $80 per passenger. Have they done a good job with that? Absolutely. But they're headed down the wrong road if they continue to increase taxations and fees.
Okay, great. Thanks. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thanks so much for joining us. And thanks for joining us here, everybody in the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kristin.
Thank you.